Albert is here. He's a filmmaker, as you can see from the background. Michelle Obama 2024. Joel, thanks for joining me.
Great to be here. Thank you.
So, before we get into the topic of your film, I really have to ask, um, because this is something that's been kind of around for a while. Is Michelle Obama a man?
No, I can assure you Michelle Obama is not a man. That was a joke by a comedian, Joan Rivers, made the
Yes.
joke. And people picked up on it kind of as a mean-spirited way to make fun of her because of all her America bashing. So it's been an online joke for several years, but she's very most definitely not a man. She's female. She's phony in many ways, but not that.
Oh, okay. Because I've seen the video of Joan Rivers. I don't know if it's still up on YouTube, but she does turn around and she says, "Everyone knows, Joe, that Michelle Obama is a tran." And I'm
Right.
sure you've seen this. And people who speculate on these matters note that she died under mysterious circumstances. That being Joan Rivers, shortly after that comment.
Yeah, look, Michelle's biggest problem is not that she used to be a dude. That's not true. Her biggest problem really is that she has nothing in common with the black community. She really grew up as a white girl. People don't know that she talks about in her book and even in her book tour about getting beat up by black kids, about being afraid of going out of her house because the neighbors would beat her up for talking white and acting white. She even in her autobiography, Becoming, talks about getting in a fist fight with a girl named Dee Dee, who called her an Oreo, meaning you're black on the outside, but you're really a white girl.
Mm.
She grew up in an exclusive household. Her father was a precinct captain. She always ran away from the black community for education, for elementary school, for high school. Instead of going to an all-black school next to her house, she would go an hour away to study with white kids. She went to Princeton. She married a biracial man. So she has nothing in common with black people. She grew up really in fear of them. And she got jobs in Chicago exploiting black people. She worked for the mayor of Chicago in the development department, knocking down the homes of black people in the projects. They knocked down Cabrini Green so they could give away the land to developers like Tony Rezko. Then Michelle got
Oh,
hired.
yes.
Yeah,
And
Michelle
didn't
got,
Tony
yeah,
Resco also handed over the Obamas over a house?
that's correct.
Hmm.
They wanted the land at Cabrini Green where there were projects with all the blacks living there, poor black people. So because it was so close to downtown, they wanted that land so they could give it to these donors. Then having proven her callousness toward the black community, Michelle was hired by the University of Chicago Medical Center for $300,000 a year to prevent black people from using the emergency room. They were losing about $50 million a year because uninsured black folks from the South Side would come to their emergency room. So Michelle headed up something called the Southside Health Collaborative. And her job was if they showed up, she'd put them in these vans and dump them in these crappy clinics so they couldn't have access to healthcare. So that's Michelle's real problem. She spent her life running away from black people and exploiting the black community on behalf of liberal whites. Liberal whites could not hire a white person to take homes from black people and say it's good for you, or take away their health care like Michelle did and say this is better for you. They needed a black person to do the dirty work, and Michelle always filled that job. But to add insult to injury, as a political candidate, Michelle pretends to be one of these ordinary black folks that she exploited all her life.
Well, it kind of reminds me of the way Margaret Sanger with the Negro Project couldn't hire white liberals to run abortion clinics in the black neighborhoods, particularly in Harlem. So she was able to pay off black ministers to preach on this and other black people to front these organizations. But I'm not sure I'd blame Michelle Obama for attending predominantly white schools. There is this cant amongst the left, I think the black left, that if you're too intellectual, if you're too smart, then you're acting white. And she obviously is very intellectual and very smart.
Well, look, Michelle really is the epitome of the American dream. She got out of the bad areas and went to great schools. She went to Princeton. She went to Harvard. She got a job as a lawyer. she's really the typical American success story. The problem is Michelle lies about it to get sympathy from minority voters and black voters. She falsely claims she suffered discrimination growing up. She falsely claims there were obstacles and people held her back because of her skin color. One of her stories she's been telling for 15 years is how she claims that her high school guidance counselor racially profiled her regarding her applying to Princeton University. Well, I found out her high school guidance counselor was a church-going black woman, so there's no way she racially profiled her. Look, Michelle went to Paris when she was in high school with her French club. She was in dance classes for all from 7 years old. She had a very privileged childhood in a political family. Her father was a precinct captain working for the Democrat Party machine. She grew up in Jesse Jackson's house because she was best friends with his daughter, Santita. So she's a very privileged kid who had all the doors open for her because of her skin color, but she falsely tries to manipulate the black community with these fake stories of having suffered discrimination.
So in a sense, she uses a certain black privilege in order to advance her career. And yet, she seems like she's fairly earned in her abilities. Now, is there any truth to the story that she was disbarred?
No, Michelle was not disbarred. What happened was she worked at Sidley and Austin law firm after Harvard for 2 years, very competitive, 2,000 lawyers. She represented Barney the dinosaur and Coors Beer. Mm-hmm. That's where she was also best friends with Bernardine Dorn, the head of the Weather Underground terrorist group from the 1960s. She worked with Bernardine Dorn. Her and Barack would go to Bernardine Dorn's house with Bill Ayers and have dinner once a week for years. The Obamas were radicalized by this couple. And that's where I'm sure that Michelle learned from Bernardine Dorn what she called the politics of fear. Michelle talks about fear a lot, as she did in 2008 on the campaign trail. Still to this day, she talks about fear, how we're all afraid of each other and all of our policies come from fear. So that she got straight from Bernardine Dorn's mouth. Michelle had these relationships with 60s terrorists that people don't know about. Mm-hmm. And I'm convinced, and I show in my film and book, Michelle Obama 2024, that I believe Michelle was radicalized by these terrorists in Chicago.
Well, Joel, I think you were one of those reporters and investigators who, among others, brought up Barack Obama's association with radical terrorists and far left-wing activists, including Bill Ayers, whom allegedly wrote his first book for him. A ghost wrote it. And yet it didn't seem to matter. I mean, Obama was plucked out of obscurity and launched into the presidency almost as an empty suit. So, I mean, I think that your claim that the same thing is going to happen with Michelle Obama is an accurate one. It's been backed by Newt Gingrich recently on television, where he said that the Republicans ought to watch Michelle Obama. And it does look like this is another one of those things where this person who really doesn't stand for anything that you can really put a finger on is going to be launched into the presidency.
Well, I've been following the Obamas for years, and I detail this in the film. And by the way, I talk to everybody she knows, 3 boyfriends, high school classmates, elementary school classmates, teachers, Princeton University thesis. So you really get to know the real Michelle Obama, a very exclusive childhood. But she is following the same formula that Barack did to become president. Barack was head of a voter registration organization in Chicago called Project Vote before he ran for office. Michelle started a voter registration organization called When We All Vote. About 5 years ago, she's been running around the country pushing registration in swing states and pushing the Democrat agenda. Barack based his candidacy on his personal story, his book, Dreams from My Father. Michelle wrote 2 autobiographies, one called Becoming, which is a movie on Netflix, and the new one called The Light We Carry, which has a special, just came out on Netflix with Oprah. And lastly, Barack was the keynote speaker at the Democrat convention in 2004 for John Kerry. The keynote speaker introduces the candidate, and that's the person they think will be the nominee at the next convention. Well, sure enough, Michelle was the keynote speaker in 2020 at the Democrat convention, introduced Joe Biden. So I see her positioning herself following Barack's formula, keeping a very high profile. And she's just positioning herself so when Biden drops out, which I think he will, Michelle will be the only candidate the Democrats can turn to. And she's really the best loved Democrat. She's the most popular, and she's the one they want anyway.
She does. I don't see anyone else rivaling her. And I do think that Biden probably, very likely isn't going to even make it possibly to the end of his term. And of course, Kamala Harris is disliked by all sides. So, I do think that what you're saying here is pretty obvious, that she will be there. Um, what what can be done? I mean, there have been moments where she has revealed aspects of her belief system when she said that she's never been prouder of America, that she'd always felt ashamed of America until they elected Obama. I mean, it shows an anti-American position, but yet isn't that what the left is into anyway?
Well, again, that comes from Bernardine Dohrn, the
Uh,
anti-American radical terror group from the 60s. That all that rhetoric of fear and she's not proud of her country, that's all from radicalization of these terrorists that she went through in Chicago. Michelle is a very highly political person. And you might remember that in 2008, she was roaming the country talking to huge audiences as a co-candidate. She would say, Barack and my campaign, this is our campaign. And she went over the top and said, for the first time in my life, I'm proud of my country. She had actually said much worse things than that, but that got the media's attention. And that's when the campaign told her, look, Barack can win, but the only way he can lose is because of you. People start hating you. Now they hear what you're saying. So they told her, you need to take a step back. So she agreed to do that. And she came up with a new marketing concept was, I hate politics and I just want to be the mom in chief. So she kept that going through the White House years and to this day. So she's gotten about 15 years of all positive publicity, hundreds of magazine covers, hundreds of talk shows. And she's the most popular person in the country, if not the world. So she's positioned herself so that she can come on the political scene and say, I hate politics, but I love this nation and people have asked me to run. So she'll come on the scene as someone who's reluctantly trying to help out and wants to bring us all back together again. Very similar to what Barack did.
Very similar. And yes, I think now that I think of it, I mean, for Barack's whole term, she played out this role of being a model mother and wife, and she would go and do these cutesy things, like on talk shows, where she would do exercise, and she promoted, better lunches for high schools, which is
That's right.
Kind of a good generic cause for a first lady to do,
Right.
even though there was some kickback from it. But nevertheless, these are all kind of like apple pie and motherhood type issues. So she kind of stayed out of controversy during the whole 8 years of Obama's White House. But yet, I get the sense that she played a significant role in the political goings on. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, look, she was the co-candidate. You look at some of those videos of her talking about Barack and our campaign. She was selling out, they don't charge, but she would have huge, sold out auditoriums all over the country. And she was a huge draw. And she just gave a very angry vision and negative vision of the United States. It's direct from the Weather Underground nonsense. So she is a very, very political person. She was political her whole life. Her father was a politician, was a precinct captain in Chicago working for the Democrat Party machine. Michelle marries a politician, and politics is Michelle Obama. She's a political animal, and she's been able to stay under the radar for some years with this, story that she doesn't like politics, but she loves politics, and I'm convinced she'll be back very soon.
I think you're quite right, and I actually, what can be done? I mean, she's going to go up, as you say, she'll be pulled out and held up as the savior of the Democrat Party and of all of this, whatever they stand for, and that people aren't going to care about her radical background any more than they cared about Obama's. It'll all be handled by the same mockingbird media, legacy media that just got rid of Tucker Carlson, the only person in that world who was actually criticizing the present regime. So what can be done?
Well, look, I think everyone needs to see Michelle Obama 2024. You can live stream the film or get the DVD on salemnow.com, or the DVD and book version are on amazon.com. And I say only the truth can stop her, because Michelle's biggest base of support that she's been working on for years is minorities and women. And if I was a Republican candidate for president, the first thing I would say is, Michelle Obama, are you going to apologize for what you did to the Black community in Chicago? Are you going to apologize for taking away their health care? Why didn't you want to allow Black people to have access to health care? They need to ask her all these questions, I think, and expose her vulnerability, which is what the kids would say about her when she was growing up. She's really an Oreo. She's Black on the outside, but she's white on the inside. She has nothing to do with the Black community. She doesn't have Black friends. She exploited the Black community growing up or ran away from them. So all of her stories about suffering racism are completely phony. And I don't think the Black community likes people that are phony or that lie or that exploit them. And Michelle Obama has been the biggest exploiter of the Black community her whole life. And that's where they should start, is addressing the issues that she has with the Black community that she treated very poorly.
Well, I mean, you need to get this over to Donald Trump, because he's going to be most likely the Republican nominee, and he's going to go up against her. And I just hope he doesn't flub it by, getting personal and making stupid comments about her appearance and that kind of stuff, which Trump tends to do.
Well, look, Michelle's appearance is something that she's, spent a lot of time manipulating. Michelle, I actually interviewed her hairdresser, celebrity hairdresser named Michael Ronnie Flowers. When she was 18 years old, Michelle had a celebrity hairdresser in Chicago. She was going to the Miracle Mile and went to all the big Chicago fashion places like Ikram Goldman and Maria Pinto. Michelle was voted on to the top 25 best dressed list in 2005, international best dressed list, because she was such a big fashionista. But then what happened in 2008 on the campaign trail for Barack, Michelle shows up looking like a homeless person. She wears a t-shirt, an old sweater, and doesn't even comb her hair, because she wanted to manipulate voters to thinking that she's some kind of Southern Black housewife from the 1950s. When in fact, she, like Obama, she was another Harvard lawyer who, in Michelle's case, exploited the Black community, exploited minorities to make a lot of money. So Michelle's been using her look and her fashion to manipulate people. Of course, when she got into the White House, she went back to being a big fashionista all of a sudden. And you might have seen her on her interviews she's done on this latest book tour. She's wearing pretty much African-American hairstyles and braids like young Black girls might wear. And she's made the comment that, oh, I couldn't wear braids in the White House because America couldn't handle it. First Black family in the White House. Total nonsense. Michelle always used weaves and all these fancy hairstyles. First time in her life she's wearing braids ever. So she's using her look and her dress to manipulate voters into thinking that she's something that she's not.
Plus, she's also playing the classic victim card, which it seems like everyone has a version of now. It's almost like the keys to the entrance into the media. You have to have been somehow hurt or damaged or victimized by something. I mean, I know college people applying to college, when they write their essay, it has to be a story of how they overcame some victim situation. That's particularly true if you're a white man, by the way. Forget it unless you have a victim story. And
it's like on American Idol. You can't be on American Idol unless you've got some sad story that you overcame some obstacle. So Michelle has worked that to a great extent with all these phony stories of suffering from racial slights growing up, from being held back in life because of her skin color, the lie about the Princeton University application. She works it quite a bit because she couldn't come out and say, I was a privileged kid. I went to Paris with my French class. I went to privileged gifted schools. I got into Princeton, I went to Harvard. I'm a Harvard lawyer. I got paid hundreds of thousands of dollars by white elites to exploit the Black community. She can't show up and say that because it wouldn't get her much support.
That's right. And I think that we're conditioned now in this country, not we, but most people, that even just seeing any black person, you assume that they were victims. It's kind of like this white man's burden, Rudyard Kipling racism that the left is into, that somehow black people are to be treated like children because they were so victimized.
Well,
And that she
yeah.
knows how to exploit that to the hilt, it sounds like.
Look, the victimization of any black Americans is mostly in these urban cities that have been controlled by Democrats and Democrat policies for 50, 60 years.
Right.
If you take away the inner cities where Democrats have impoverished the black community, black and white poverty rates are the same. 10% of blacks are wealthy, about 40 or 50% are middle class. So the idea that somehow they're all victims is simply untrue, and most black people would totally disagree with that.
Right. I mean, especially the Obamas. I mean, he got an $8 million book advance, but even before he ran for president. And I think the house in Martha's Vineyard, which is right along the coast, is worth, I think, some was upwards of $50 million.
No, the Martha's Vineyard house was 14 million, and it just goes to show you how much the Obamas, number one, think that climate change is a hoax because the house is right on the beach, and secondly, where do white liberal elites go to live? Martha's Vineyard. That kind of shows you who the Obamas really are.
That's right. I mean, Martha's Vineyard is the playground for them. I mean, unless, of course, you're an illegal alien, in which case you're not welcome. But so, Joel, where can people? I mean, I hope you get this film into the hands of the Trump people for sure. And is it going to be seen in movie theaters, or where do you get it?
Well, we don't have a theatrical release, but you can watch the film right now online, live stream it on salemnow.com. Go to salemnow.com. You can also buy the DVD there on salemnow.com. And then the book version, as well as the DVD, are on amazon.com. So there's so much you can learn about Michelle's real life story, her relationship with Barack, her family, her political ties, her working for the mayor of Chicago and working for the University of Chicago hospitals. It's all there. And it's a story completely opposite of what Michelle and the media have been saying about her life story.
Well, I think it's urgent that people get this movie and this book, especially now, and especially in this coming year, as we move closer to the election, and as she will most likely be rolled out as the candidate. And I do think that all things said, she probably will win too. I mean, I don't see it just like Obama did.
Well, what Michelle brings to the table is something called plausibility. If the media says Joe Biden is leading in all the swing states by 10 points, no one's going to believe it. If they say Kamala Harris is leading in all the swing states by 8 points, you wouldn't believe it. If on election night they say Joe Biden won by all the swing states, all by 5 points, he's president again, you wouldn't believe it. Michelle brings plausibility. If they say Michelle Obama is leading in all the swing states, you'd say, well, I guess that's believable because she's so popular. If she wins on election night and she sweeps the country, you'd say, well, I believe it. So that's what they need, that plausibility. And Michelle brings that to the table because she's just so popular.
Indeed. And if she gets the black vote and the woman vote, yeah, I mean, that's the core that's going to put her over the top. So, this book and your work shows her real attitudes toward blacks and probably toward women too, I might add.
Well, it's really, as I said, Michelle exploited the black community her whole life. In the film version, you can see her talking to black audiences in Delaware and other places, and she puts on a phony urban accent that she's never had in her life. She
Hillary Clinton used to do that too.
Well, Michelle puts on this phony accent, very insulting, to try to make black voters think that she's one of them. And so that's the phoniness of Michelle Obama, all phony. It's not that she's a dude. She's not a dude. She never was a dude. It's the fact that she.
I'm glad we cleared that up.
Yeah, she really she grew up. Even Barack said when he met Michelle, she reminded him of his 80-year-old grandmother from Kansas. They had a typical Leave It to Beaver family, like a white family. as
Right.
Barack described it, quote unquote. So Michelle grew up pretty much with an attitude and was afraid of black people, got beat up by them. And it's no surprise that in her jobs in Chicago, she was hired to exploit them. And that's why it's just so insulting and demeaning to hear her put on a phony urban accent and pretend that she suffered from racial discrimination, which she never did.
And I also hope that the Republicans and the opponents don't shy away from nailing her on certain very specific issues, like, for example, what is a woman? Does she support gender neutering surgeries for children? Make her answer those questions, because the people in the Biden administration are not able to answer those questions right now for reasons that are interesting.
Well, Michelle really has never had any ideas of her own. She pretty much mimics what's going on around her, what Bernardine Dohrn taught her, the politics of fear, hating America. Whatever the Democrat Party is saying or doing, you can see it on her Twitter account. She just repeats it. So Michelle,
Well, so then that's a key in terms of going after her. Nail her on specific issues and make her answer specifically yes or no. I noticed that I'm watching these congressional hearings, and they're bringing on Becerra from Health and Human Services, and they're saying, "Would you answer this question? Are you authorizing surgeries for children that are going to neuter them? Yes or no?" And he won't answer. So
look, it's going to be tough because Michelle will have all 100% media support. They're not going to ask her any serious questions.
Yeah, but that's just it. There has to be a way to break through, and people can do this. I mean, recently there was a symposium on a college campus with some of the major publishers in media, New York Times, Washington Post, and this guy broke through and he said, "Hey, why aren't you covering the Nord Stream pipeline bombing? Why aren't you covering, and he mentioned several important stories, and then he called them just media whores, and you haven't done anything, I mean, in the past 30 years. And that went viral. So there are examples where people can get through and ask these kinds of questions.
It's going to be tough because you're just going to have all the media
is
support,
completely sold out. No, there's
all
no
the
question.
big tech support. I mean, she may not even agree to debate Donald Trump. So it may be tough to narrow down.
Why should she? She'll do the Biden approach. She'll sit in the basement, and she knows that there's machinery that's going to put her in office. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And so, yes, it's going to be very difficult to overcome that. But, I hope that people on all sides recognize that it has to be done. There has to be a free and fair election where you have real answers. I mean, you really bore in on what these people are going to stand for, because this is important. But, I mean, we're up against what I call a conspiracy, but however you phrase it, certainly the mainstream legacy media obviously is completely in the satchel.
Right. It's going to be very tough for any Republican candidate to overcome this marriage of interests between big tech, the deep state, the legacy media, the globalists and Soros and all these guys. They control a great deal of the ability to communicate and have dialogue and ask questions. And even, some people will say even the whole voting process, the election commissions, the mail-in voting, they managed to attack.
All of it.
Yeah, they managed to attack the election system. We used to have votes on one day. It's election day. You go out and vote. If you can get your people motivated, they'll go vote for you and you'll win. If you can't, that means they don't like your policies. They're not going to go out and vote. So now you have 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 3 months to.
Well, they just keep it open until they get enough votes.
Yeah, anyway. Look, the Democrat position is, if the Republicans win, the system is broken and it has to be changed. If they win, they say democracy worked. So here in California, we have a mail-in vote state. So every single apartment building, for instance, in the San Fernando Valley in Los Angeles, there's millions of apartments. People move all the time, but millions of ballots go out and get mailed to all these apartment buildings and all these homes.
Multiple ballots.
Who knows who collects them and fills them out and mails them in? Nobody knows.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, I got multiple ballots here in Boston for this last election. Oh, they're basically papering the house I mean, the last election was the biggest junk mail in history. I mean, millions of ballots were just sent out. University of Santa Barbara, which was empty because of the lockdowns, they got, I think it was 3,000 votes came out of there. There was no one in the campus. So, yes, this is,
Yeah, so
obviously they have figured out how to rig the system, as Elizabeth Warren used to say, back when she was testifying against certain electronic voting companies. Now you don't hear anything from her about that.
that's right.
Anyway, Joel, but we could go on and on. I want to stick with the topic here. Michelle Obama 2024 is the film. There's a book as well. Joel, again, let my listeners and viewers know how they can get this. I hope to have you back from time to time between now and election, because this is a critical issue.
Okay, so again, the movie, you can live stream it online on your computer or phone, tablet, Roku, on your TV. Go to salemnow.com, salemnow.com. They have an app as well. You can live stream it or buy the DVD there, or at amazon.com, you can get the DVD or the book version, which is very, very in-depth and very great, well-written book. And there's an audio book as well on Amazon.
Okay, Salem Now. So, Joel Gilbert, I want to thank you for joining me as always.
Great.